Hello and welcome. I'm Shrikant Shastri, the president of Thai Delhi-NCR and your host for this evening. So the Big Debate monthly series is something that we are launching with today this evening. This is a monthly series where we will pick one topic every month that is not just topical, but also fairly contentious, but usually gets brushed under the carpet. And we hope to bring two debaters with a point of view and a counterpoint of view debating that out. So, without further ado, I'd like to invite our two debaters for the evening, Pramod Bhasin and Yashish Dahiya. Welcome, Pramod, and it's a pleasure to have you on the inaugural event of the Big Debate series. This is the March edition, and we picked a topic which is very topical now. Do founders need coaching to ensure that rapid funding and scale up doesn't go to their head? So, just a quick word about why we picked this topic. We've known for a few weeks or few months now that this is a real and serious problem, but we wanted to ensure that it was not an imaginary problem we were picking up. So, we actually ran a poll to check what the perceptions are among founders and investors, and about 200 founders and investors responded via the LinkedIn poll. And I found it hard to believe it, but collectively, about 90% of the respondents believe that this is a problem of some magnitude. Many believe that most founders go off track, whereas some others believe that some founders go off track. So at least there is a clear perception that this is a real problem. And when I spoke to both of you individually, Pramod and Yashish, you broadly agreed that this is a real problem and not an imaginary one. And we often looked at the world around us. We saw what happened to Uber some years ago, WeWork some years ago, and now we're seeing some of that in India also. So we have anecdotal validation also. So without losing any time, I'd like to invite you and Pramod and Yashish to speak for about 5 minutes to lay out your broad point of view, after which we'll jump into a bunch of questions. And I'd like to add that we've got over 100 questions coming in from the audience in advance as they registered for the event. With that, I'd like to invite you, Pramod, to set the stage for this.
Thank you, Shrikant. Delighted to be here. Delighted to be here with people of the caliber of Yashish and Shrikant and all the other people attending this session at Thai. It's an exciting topic to some extent because it's also, I guess, it would make good headline news, right? Every time it's like breaking news and makes for good gossip session. But this is far more serious. It's a far more serious event and a far more serious issue that we are facing in front. Shrikant, I was surprised that 90% believe this is a real problem. And I must tell you that number shocks me because I didn't think it was such a huge problem as it signifies or as people think it is. And I wonder if sometimes the news overtakes, all the silent warriors who are very good, very thoughtful, who have done this very well, and all the other founders who have been able to navigate through these areas extremely well in the past. And I do think there's a lot of that the noise captures a small minority. So just as some thoughts, and I really look forward to the question and answer sessions that we're going to have, just a few points that I would love to make up front. I don't believe this is as widespread a problem as we think it is, because I know many founders who work very hard, who are doing very well. India has this kind of middle class attitude also, which really allows you to be fairly thoughtful and insightful, and particularly in many parts of. I'm a good Punjabi, so we will be effervescent, and we don't know control very well. But other than that, the fact is, there's large parts of India, including in Punjab, people who, and of course a lot of the major unicorns in India are run by them, but people who have done extremely well during this time. So I do want to temper perhaps a view that suggests that this is a large problem for many, many people. It isn't that. It is a problem for a small minority. But clearly, it's a problem. And by the way, it's a problem not just in India, it's a problem all over the world. I don't think you're going to find this not happening in other parts of the world, but it happens all the time. It's been happening for ages. And if it doesn't happen with founders, it's happened with CEOs, it's happened with other people who own industries, it's happened with people who've inherited money. So you see examples of this happening all the time. The key point that I would just make is that rapid funding and growth, we are all driven for success. We're all built to try and succeed, to achieve real growth, to achieve rapid funding. That is the essence of what we want founders to do. If I'm an investor or when I have been a founder, certainly those were the criteria based on which I was able to raise money or actually go out, in fact, and fund other people. Those are the criteria I look for. And yet, we have to draw that fine line which says at what point in time does that search for rapid growth and rapid funding, when one, do we cross the border, cross the line, and get to a point where it is unseemly and certainly destructive and highly unproductive to be in a situation where you are really driving away as much of perhaps your customers to some extent, perhaps your other stakeholders, perhaps future investors, certainly perhaps your employees. Two, the other question that I would raise here is, at what point do you cross the line and then celebrate success? Because to the extent that you allow something like this to go to your head, suggests that you have said, I am now successful, not recognizing that the world is rarely that smooth. The line is rarely straight. The curves that take us up and down all the time are huge. I can tell you, certainly when I was building Genpact, we got our money and we started the industry, and 9/11 happened. And then the 2008 and 9 crisis happened. So no matter that we may consider that we have achieved great success, great growth, great funding, and therefore we can celebrate in a way perhaps which is unproductive or destructive, I think the memory that life is much longer than that events overtake us, I think remains a very, very important element. The last one I would just say is, I do believe that part of the reason this happens is how easily we put people on a pedestal. And there's a difference in India between that, because it is a rarer event. And therefore, there are many more celebrations and many more accolades provided to people who are successful, even if it's a mild success, perhaps, or it's not a major success. I keep reminding, for instance, everybody when I built Genpact, which is now, like a 70,000 crore market cap company, that by global standards, we're a small to medium-sized company. That's all we are. And recognizing that reality is important to keep your feet on the ground and to balance it. But we must recognize that what is success and our definition of success and the pedestals we are placed on are all temporary and do not last. I'm sure there'll be many more questions around this, but with that, I'll turn it back to you, Srikanth.
Great way to start, Pramod. While you started off by saying it's a problem for a small minority, I think it was beautiful the way you articulated the fact that there is a Lakshman Rekha that gets crossed, and also success can be fleeting, definition of success, and your personal memories from your Genpact days of highs and lows were fantastic. Yashish, over to that.
Always a pleasure to be here on TIE platforms. And, obviously, huge honor to be here, sharing the stage with Bhasin sir. So, as I go through our own journey as a founder, because I've only been a founder kind of once, so to say. I think there used to be days when, we used to feel that we are dead. The company's finished, everything's gone. We used to have kind of ulcer-like feelings in our stomach, me and my co-founder. And there were days when we felt like we are right. And there would be more and more of the bad days in the past. When we started, there were many more of those. As we got older, I guess those bad days were fewer and the better days were more. When I speak to founders, see, first of all, obviously it's an issue. It is an issue because as a founder, you are empowered with a lot of capital and a lot of people are following you. They trust you to be right all the time. I meet a lot of my employees and I ask them, why are you here? And they say, Yashish, when we met you 14 years ago, we realized you were not a fool and we were ready to follow you. And somewhere that tells you cannot be wrong, right? So you are under a lot of pressure to be right all the time, or guide right all the time, or not make mistakes. It is difficult for founders in that position to be able to kind of control themselves. It helps if you have co-founders because your first source of excitement is within each other, and you kind of can counterbalance that a little bit, because somebody will say, okay, we had a good day, but don't worry. The way we look at it is, in the last 1 year, we've had 200 bad days and 100 good days, and then have years come when we've had 10 bad days and 360 good days, or whatever it is, right? When I speak to founders, people usually there's lip service to something like coaching or these things. Coaches are brought in because they may add to valuation. Basically, founders at a fundamental look at three things, as I see it. Most founders, I guess, they're looking for funding. They're looking for somebody who can give them business, and they're looking for somebody who may be able to give them a core skills partner. Like if I'm looking for a CTO or something, they may. I think those are the three things founders value. Beyond that, for most founders, it is nice to talk, but they're really not. They really don't care beyond that. And I think many a times in that mode, we forget to get very valuable lessons that the other person may be actually. As I look back, for us, it really helped having someone like a Sanjeev or anybody, somebody who honestly you would never eat with, right? Because honestly, you will always think of them as somebody sort of greater than you. And in any argument, you would kind of just, at some level, you were willing to just accept their thought process. I guess that helps a lot, because that's required for a founder. Sometimes the founder can start thinking they are God. And you've seen in so many situations, right? The founder starts believing, I don't want to go into specific situations, but when you look at them, it wasn't like people were not trying to coach them. People were trying. They were just not listening. There were cases when people called their venture backers stupid, everybody on their board stupid, etc., etc. I'm talking about years. I'm not talking about anything recent, right? I'm talking about years. So I guess people were trying. It wasn't like people were not trying. We were just not willing to, right? Those are my views. I guess it helps if we start to understand that everything is passing, nothing is permanent.
No, it's an interesting start to a debate, because I see two things standing out for me. One is, Pramod, the fact that both of you seem to agree with the same side, seem to be on the same side of the debate, that 90% figure seems to get validated. And both of you seem to be kind of on the same side of the fence in that sense. But it's interesting that it is therefore more a question of degree rather than it being there or not there. Pramod, when you and I spoke 2 weeks ago, you compared the current generation of founders with the previous generation of big businessmen and industrialists who built their businesses quietly, without going up on a pedestal, without facing the kind of issues that today's generation of founders is facing. And they're your friends, they're your peer group. What can we learn from that generation, which can be, they had access to money, they had access to fame, but they stayed balanced? What was the big difference?
Yes, it's an interesting point, Shrikant. One of the differences is how quickly you achieve success. And particularly in today's world of unicorns and the drive for growth and raising money and investments, etc., where you can do that in this race. In 2 years, I became a unicorn of $1 million. Great. Okay. That was unheard of earlier, right? You could never achieve that. Of course, some cases, technology helps you do that, and you come up with fantastic products and services. In some cases, it's sheer, valuations, which are stupid and through the roof sometimes. So I think that becomes a factor. As Yashish was saying, if you struggle through 14 years, you tend not to take success that quickly. But if you haven't had to go through that struggle and you've come up with an idea, then people have started chasing you for funding and said, here, take more money. I mean, there's enough instances of people saying, I only want to raise 5 million, and people come in and say, no, take 20, please. Thank you very much, because we need to invest the money. So I think I'm not suggesting that happens all the time. It happens in a few times. But I think how quickly you achieve success certainly is a factor, because if you haven't gone through the pain and the straps, then you don't realize what may lie ahead and how easily that apple cart gets upturned. Two, I really do think in many of those cases, the boards that you set up, certainly in our case in Genpact, for instance, the board we had was a global world-class board of fantastic achievers. And to the point that Yashish is making about Sanjeev. On our board as a chairperson is Bob Scott, who was the president of Morgan Stanley. And the other gentleman on the audit committee was the former president of Allied Signal. Now, these are not people who allow you to get carried away very easily. They're huge achievers. Mike Spence, Nobel Prize winner, Dean of Stanford Business School is on your board. Well, it puts things in perspective that, all right, you've built a business, you've kind of helped create an industry, you've raised $400 million, and there's a whole bunch of people out there sitting there saying, so what, right? So I think that balance, becomes very important as you think about life. Three, I would say, I think the rhetoric around startups and unicorns, etc., in my view, is completely out of hand at this point in time. There are fantastic fantastic businesses built in India. One of the greatest business value creators in India is Deepak Parekh, HDFC. He's created more value almost, if you look at the market cap of the combined HDFC companies, than Reliance.
Yeah.
But is he fated for it? No. The next unicorn, the next startup, etc. So a lot of it is driven by news and media awareness around us. And the last point I would just make is the one I had referred to earlier, which is if you get put on a pedestal which suggests that you are phenomenally successful, that you're a genius, you're brilliant, etc., all of the words that go with it, at some point you start believing that stuff. If you haven't gone through the ups and downs and you haven't realized that, this changes rather quickly. I do think though, I'll go back to the 90%. I think while 90% may think it's a problem, my point is that I think most founders don't behave like that. It's still a small exception that do behave, for whom this rapid funding and growth goes to their heads and who need the help and support. The problem is it is exactly that kind of founder who actually is unlikely to look for help and support, because the very thing that is making it go to the head tells them that they don't need any help until it's too late. And I do think it's hard to control that, and I'm not sure this is likely to change, and it will continue over time.
Yashish, you made a similar point when we spoke. Pramod mentioned the word putting on a pedestal. You spoke about founders getting success without pain and therefore believing that they are God. So the question is it that because there's been so much money available in private markets, equity markets, that founders haven't really had to experience pain? So this success versus not experiencing pain, how have you seen this playing out? Last 2 years were very different, but you've been an entrepreneur for many years now. I'm sure you had your share of pains. What kept you grounded in this whole journey, therefore?
Shrikant, it's a two-edged story here. And the reason I would say that is there's more capital available. And from a perspective of it somehow feels a lot easier to raise capital. Now, whether it is easier or not easier, I can't say, because I'm not the one. It seems easier, right? There were times when raising $1 million was a big thing. Today, if you go to raise them, you know what I mean, right? Today, the number is probably 50 million or 100. So I guess now, but the difficult part in that, quite honestly, is putting it in perspective. And, I think there was this interesting comment by someone that who do you take coaching from or advice from? Is it from a contemporary, or is it from somebody who was 10 years? And that becomes difficult, right? Because the person who's been there 10 years ago has probably lived more of life, but has seen a time which was different, and may not totally appreciate the dynamics of today's world and why they are such, because they're out of whack with their reality. And somewhere to that extent, I see with a lot of founders, I can see, I learn a lot. Even when I'm speaking to my children, I try to learn a lot. Look, their life is different. My life was different. Everything that applied to me, somewhere we just need to be careful on that. Now, but what I do tell people is at least you should know when you are gambling and when you're on something solid. And yes, this time, people are okay to gamble more, because they have experienced in the past success by having gambled. If you would, by things having a probability of success rather than a almost certainty of success. People have found, the term pivot essentially means that. What does the term pivot means, which we started hearing in the last 5-6 years? It essentially means if what you try doesn't work, try something else. If what you try doesn't work, now someone like me may sneer at that term.
Yeah.
Because what that tells me is that, hey, that means your idea was crap. That means you actually failed, but you're just getting another lifeline, right? But that may not be the right vision lens to look at it from. The lens may be that it was acceptable to fail rapidly and multiple times. So I guess sometimes our lenses are colored, and we be very careful with those inputs, especially if people are looking towards us for mentorship.
Yeah. Yashish, you're respected because of your temperament and the way you stayed grounded. There's a related question from someone in the audience. Preeti Chaudhary has asked, look, did our upbringing and values get lost in the process somewhere that our founders lost their way? Because all of us in India have been brought up to be believing in frugality, to being careful about what we do, not gamble. Gambling is a bad word. So somewhere, is it a question of upbringing and values? That's a question for either of you. Both of you feel free to jump in.
I wouldn't go as far as saying upbringing and values, because that is hard hitting on parents. I think we are all adults and we have our own responsibilities. But a lot of people, after one has made a lot of money, do they change as people? And I have this statement, "Hum badal gaye to hum the hi kya?" So, right? And I think it also helps everybody, what is your barometer? Is it capital? Is it growth? This can't, for somebody like me, my family's, the time I spent with my family and the quality of that time and the children's upbringing and my relationship with my wife and, my sports work, what my timings in my triathlon are, those are just as important, if not more important to me than the business aspect. So you're standing on 5-6 legs. No one leg can go mad, right? Because it's unlikely that one leg becomes, and your other legs keep poking at it, because they keep kind of saying, hey, so what? You're still not as good in the other leg, right? So I guess people have to find their own answers. But I think we are adults ourselves. It's just remind yourself every day of that. I think it kind of works.
And Yashish, I guess go back home each day, your kids say, Dad, you know nothing. It keeps you grounded as well, I'm assuming.
Absolutely.
But I disagree. If I may, I'm going to take a completely contrary view of that. I think, Yashish, the fact that you are grounded is a direct result of how you were brought up. Direct. The fact that you sit on 5 legs is a direct result of that. Okay, it's a result, and that's why you think the way you do. And I think a lot of it has to do with how you're brought up. A lot of it has to do with your values that you brought up to celebrate and how you think about that. And two, so I'm also something different, Yashish, to you. I think once you have been successful, you should change. Of course, you should change. And I always tell people, if you're going to make money, guys, do something more with it. Do something more with yourself, with your time, with your energy. So maybe you don't change in your head, but you do change a lot of what you do. Otherwise, why make money? Why bother? I've held this belief for a very long time, which is do something with the money. Putting it in the wrong answer, right? And so when a wealth manager comes to me, I'm very clear with them. I said, I'm going to spend my money, one way or the other on a variety of causes that I want, and I'm going to go out. So I think how you're brought up matters hugely. Who you're surrounded with, matters hugely. We are influenced by and who you spend your time with and who are your friends. So for instance, certainly my time when I spend in the leveraged buyout market, which is what I was doing before I came back to India, taught me a lot about how bond, the barbarians at the gate and during all of that era is when I was in the US. Watching, RJR Reynolds being swallowed up, KKR being set up, Blackstone coming up, huge risk taking. And it gave me an appetite for risk taking and for celebrating success, which was very different. But the good thing there was that while people love celebrating success, I think they recognize that they're not unique. And so I think here it's important to feel that, again, to recognize that you've done well, you've done way, but you're not unique, because there will be many others who will do also, hopefully, in a country as vast as India, who will do extremely well, and more power to them, more power to them. And I hope many of them grow larger. But I do think that it's a lot to do with how your mind works and how you deal with this and how you celebrate versus and one of the tragedies that we have certainly in our country is we're not big risk takers, Shrikant, in my view. India as a whole, we're just not, which is why you don't see the big. For instance, if you compare us to the Chinese, we're very small risk takers. Our appetite for risk is particularly smaller. Scandinavians, look at the companies they've built. Those tiny little countries, don't speak English, have built world-breaking, world-embracing companies. And I think these things become very important as you get more aware of what's happening around you in the world. I always use a Scandinavian example because I always think, here's Denmark, here's Sweden, tiny countries. Look at the companies they've produced. And look at the spirit. I mean, if you go to those countries and you ask them, why do they do it? They say the weather is so bad, we have no choice. We have to get out and do things outside. Same with the Scottish. I have some very close friends who are Scottish. And I said, how did Scotland rule the world? Because a lot of the explorers who came to India were Scottish. And they said, well, come to Scotland. The weather is so bad, you have to get out. And the land is so infertile, you can't grow anything. You have no job. You have to get out. So I think necessity and driving that necessity becomes very, very important. The last one I would just say is around the concept of migrants and immigrants. And I think in a country like America, for instance, you see the success of the Indians in Silicon Valley. That success is percolating to India. Of course, it's also homegrown vastly here without any Silicon Valley connection at all. But when you start hearing the examples is when you start moving up. My contention is that I think over time, some of this hubris will settle down as people realize, all right, you're not the one and only, you're not Superman or Superwoman, and there's many more around you who are equally, if not more competent, and therefore, yes, you've done one thing well. The last thing I would just say, I think one of the things I've been certainly taught is that many founders are one-trick ponies, including people like myself. In investments, I've done well. And therefore, because you've been successful in one place, doesn't mean you'll be successful in other ventures. In fact, many of them do not succeed, as I didn't when I started the Skills Academy, and having lost a boatload of money, I retreated and shut down the business, and realized there are many things I don't know how to do. So I do think, if I may, just a different opinion, but yeah, when I hear Yashish speaking, I'm hearing not him, I'm hearing his family, I'm hearing his parents, I'm hearing everyone, and his children will grow up the same way because they'll have heard him speak the same way. And that's why it matters.
I think values and upbringing, clearly, Yashish is probably too modest to acknowledge that he's done a good job on that front. And Pramod, I'm glad you called it out. But Pramod, your point about saying, have Indian entrepreneurs not taken big enough risks to taste failure? Have they remained one-trick ponies and therefore not tasted failure? I think that's a valid point. But Yashish, you spoke about the 5 legs you stand on, 5 different things you do. I must tell you that Parag Dole sent in a question in advance, Parag Dole from Inventors, saying, Yashish, what other approaches did you use to stay grounded? So I'm imagining he's found his answer when you described those 5 things, unless you add something to that.
Oh, I wouldn't say, but at the same time, see, there are, I think it helps to have a co-founder, because that really balances things quite a bit. It helps to value everything in life and to be moderated. It helps to know that your team is looking upon you. They are like your family. And whatever you do reflects, start to take pride and eventually you're responsible for their families also, because how they behave over 10 years, 20 years will determine their success, whether they are in your company or another company. And if they, because of your actions or because of your income, they become like, you can't really do worse than that, right? Basically teaching people wrong stuff. So I think you founder, and I guess I give you an example. Like recently, my kids were talking, and my son said to my daughter that, Dia, you don't understand. For Papa, his employees are also his family. We are not his only family, and so he cannot only. And I think that is very important, right? Because if you don't have that, it's like you will not behave like an owner. You will behave like you're renting something, and that can have a different effect. So I guess that's all I would say. That's all I would say. Plus, I can just share one thing, but that can be a very personal thing, and maybe different experiences. I have never found satisfaction from anything physical for more than 6 months. If you have, you may be unique. So if you buy a new house, a new car, it'll look great for a while, but after 6 months you will tire out of it, and you will want something else. It's experiences that you remember 10 years later. The laugh you had with your parents. And I'm not saying this for a cliched statement. It's a fact. I've come to imbibe that fully. That look, you actually waste your time through gathering physical goods, because within 6 months you will grow out of them. Yeah. And you will want the next one. You can buy the best car in the world. In 6 months, you'll want the bigger car or the better car. And, eventually it'll be a waste for you. It'll just, you collected some more baggage around you. And I know that sounds so stupid, but I'm saying that from deep within, because that's the fact.
But Yashish, I'm going to take that on. I'm sorry, I'm going to take that on. Look, I want to get the debate away, if I may, from individuals. You and
me.
No,
fair enough, sir.
Right? Because the fact is, the world works on people wanting more, right? The economy is run that way. People want bigger things. They buy bigger things. They like bigger things. I'll be honest with you. Yeah, I want a big yacht. I would have loved to own a big yacht. I don't have one. I'd love it. Are you kidding? You must be kidding. I love it. And when I see the successful businessmen of the world, they have planes, they have this, they have that. So yes, the satisfaction doesn't last, but I must admit the satisfaction. I'm sitting here in Goa. The satisfaction of having a house here in Goa lasts for 25 years. Let me absolutely assure you. But so my point is, it's if you think more broadly, it takes all kinds of people, right? It takes you, it takes me, it takes Srikanth. All of us have different views on this, and I think all of them are fine. I don't think there is any such thing that this is too much and this is too much. I think the things that matter to me in this whole dialogue is, when does it become unproductive? When does it become destructive? When does it cross that line of where the dialogue is going? When do they start behaving in ways which kill the company, which kill their reputation, would piss off customers? What people do individually. When we went public, I was standing on the New York Stock Exchange floor. Somebody asked me, Pramod, you made a lot of money. What are you going to do with it? I scratched my head and I said, I'll buy a new music system. The best I could come up with at that time. But the fact is, all of America, all of the UK, of many countries, people like spending money. And if they do, more power to them. I may not, and more power to them. But to me, this is more about, are you getting destructive with the way you behave to run the businesses that you have and fulfill the responsibilities that you have? And I think that's very unfortunate when people get to that stage. Sorry, I just thought I had to chime in there, Yashish, because
very fair.
I guess I'm more of a consumer than you are.
my son is the same, sir. So my son and daughter are different. And so my son is exactly the same. I keep telling him, and he keeps telling me, you watch, I'll enjoy. So
he has my vote.
Shifting focus a bit, we have a question from Anil Sharma, who is a successful coach himself. He says, look, when you look at founders, what aspects of leadership do you typically think they are deficient in terms of where they need to be as they scale up? You spoke about some of the things, ability to cope with failure, for example. But what are those 2 or 3 areas that each of you can point out, which are areas that founders typically run short of as they're scaling up?
So you want to go first? I can.
So go ahead,
always
Yashish, please.
There is an easy answer to it and a difficult answer to it. There isn't a particular thing that I can think of, but let's kind of talk through what actually happens. Right, a founder has to have the vision, the will to build something and be very proud of it, and stay focused on it and deliver it. He will have ups and downs. I think it's the emotional control in those ups and downs that when you do know what happens, right? When things are really, really down, people can do anything. I've had people call me in the middle of the night saying they want to do X and Y and Z because they're not feeling good, and then the other side happens and you stop listening to people. I guess I would say somewhere being circumspect about the fact that, look, life is going to have ups and downs, and being aware of that and being balanced through that. And these eventualities are not you. I don't know, maybe, I think it's very critical for a founder, because it's critical for any leader to be able to distance themselves from what's going on. And that's hard. That's not easy. That did not ever happen very easily for us. It took us a very long time. We all the time get hassled when we are hammered, and we feel very good. But I think that balance is very key. I think the second part is just having empathy, which I think most founders have. I think most founders are very self-aware, but empathy is also very critical, because if you don't have empathy, then you start treating investors' money as not important, or employees' time as not important. I hear terminologies which, like, I once heard a founder saying the tigers and the sheep or something. How can you speak that way about your own employees? Right? No, to me, it doesn't feel right. Right. So somewhere I think empathy and balance between ups and downs is very critical, because without that, in a down, I could kind of shoot myself. In an up, I could go and kind of, do anything. So
Pramod,
Yes.
you've seen many founders. What do you think is missing?
Shrikant, honestly, I find that most founders are. So one, I think we meet all kinds of founders. Some are exuberant, some are modest, some are quiet, some yell and scream, some are emotional, some are able to control their emotions, some are not, some are very thoughtful, some are very intuitive. Every kind of founder exists. Peter Drucker said it well. When you talk to him about who are leaders, what is the definition of leader? He said, my only definition of leadership is those who have followers. That's it. There are all the other varieties exist, right? So if you go from Andy Grove at Intel, who was a very reclusive, quiet guy, to Jack Welch, who was very fiery, to others who are very different, you get every kind, right? Now, and success comes to all of them, to all varieties. So one, I think all varieties are fine. You decide what is fine. You want to be exciting, you want to be balanced, that's up to you. Most welcome. My view on that is, my view on finance, as long as you grow sales, you can have whatever personality trait that you like. Please, you pick. I'm least concerned about that, because honestly, people are individual. So what's missing quite often is some of the points I talked about earlier, which is a sense of balance, which has to come from being able to talk to others, and a recognition that the journey is a long journey. And so I think that's the idea that I find many people don't play for, which is the long term. This is a 10, 15-year journey. Yashish has talked about 14 years ago we started, and that's how long it takes you to win. And in that time, there will be many ups and downs. That knowledge tends to temper you anyway, right?
Well, great points, actually. Yashish said being circumspect about ups and downs, being empathetic, and what you added to that, recognizing it's a long journey and therefore there will be ups and downs. Now, clearly, these are gaps that some founders have. Pramod, in deference to you, where you say it's a minority of founders. But having said that, if one has to fix this problem, I know you said, Yashish, earlier, founders don't want to listen. And we have questions from two people in the audience. Vasudevan, who says, do founders really want to listen to others? And Suman, who says, how do founders develop the humility to accept that they need help in these areas? What can boards, investors, anyone else do to gently steer those founders who have a need for something like this? Yashish, you wearing a hat of a founder, Pramod, you wearing a hat of an investor and a founder yourself. How do you, I mean, is it all about who can do that gentle nudging? Do investors have the time? Are they interested in doing it? What's the answer to this actually?
So
Or will we
some
continue
do.
to
Sorry,
this function?
sir, with your permission, I'll go first because I've had a lot of experiences when I would have gone off track,
Okay.
and how different people helped me along the way. And I will not talk about co-founders and employees, but I will talk about family. But I'll talk about people who were on the board and multiple people. Right? It's not the same person every time. I think what worked always was not reacting while I was in a group. And I was in my kind of, let's say, my show off mode that, okay, I'm Tiger and I'm kind of the king and all that kind of stuff. So there's no point kind of at that time, reacting to me. Perhaps post that whole showbiz is done, after that, talking to me separately always worked. I have understood my fault, and that personal rapport. So, I think for a coach, it is very important not to make a show of the fact that they are coaching, but to develop that connect and then have that individual conversation with the individual. And everybody's done it. Parag's done it. Mohit from Temasek has done it. TCM from Inventus has done it. There are times when people from Premji Invest have done it. Divya from North has done it. And Sanjeev has done it very often, of course. Every time somebody tried to make it, a bite or something, it's almost always never worked. I guess that's what I would say.
So I'm guessing that many of these people, Mohit, Parag, Sanjeev, were all investors and
they were all investors. Yes, they were all investors, and some were older to me, some were younger to me. It doesn't really matter that much. Like, I'm sure, a few of them are like my age. Sanjeev is obviously a good 10 years elder.
So therefore, I'm going to make a provocative statement, and Pramod, I'd love for you to respond. Clearly, Yashish found a bunch of investors who had it in them to do that gentle nudging and mentoring and not posturing. So is there therefore a scarcity of such investors? Do we have too many newbies as investors who look at an Excel spreadsheet and in their role as investor, but not having enough empathy? Are we running short of that breed therefore?
I don't think so. Again, this is very different. And my view is more, I would say, institutional, right? Very often you are investing in the founder because of that zeal, that energy, that commitment, that fire. That's why you invest in them, right? Because you test them and you say, okay, they're going to do it. If you talk to most venture capitalists, they'll tell you they invest behind the founder, not the business idea necessarily. You are investing to say, this person will find a way. He or she is going to find their way. So, that line is very thin as to when they cross over, when those same attributes make you cross. Two, certainly institutionally, what a board can or can't do, what an investor can or can't do is very fine, is a very fine line, because they cannot interfere in many areas till it's too late, till they can show that it's destructive. So in many of these cases that I'm aware of that are making the news nowadays or have made the news in the past, these issues have been festering for a very long time. Of a famous bank where everybody knew that the founder was full of, had got completely carried away, but it took years to change that, because that's the power you have as a board. You cannot change that so easily, and you're reluctant to do so because you don't know what you're going to get the next time, and can somebody else carry it on, because it always is a double-edged sword. It's never black and white, right? Which says they're only getting carried away, but they don't have any basic skills or they don't have any basic ideas. It's never true. They have very good basic ideas and they get carried away, and that's the dilemma. And then what do you do, right? So I think, to the extent that people back founders that way, who are grounded and sensible and thoughtful, that's terrific. But there will be many other people, and certainly again, I would look at the broader world canvas. Many times I've met founders who are so flamboyant, and they speak the marketing head, which is so large that it's hard to distinguish the fact that they have $300,000 in revenue ambitions, which is we're going to be an $8 billion company, right? We've seen that here, by the way. I've seen. I won't mention their names, but these are supposedly very. They say, no, I'm 10 billion now. I'll be 50 billion in 2 years. Right. Okay, wonderful. I can see it happen. So I think institutionally, I don't think it's a question of lack of empathy, etc. It's more the disconnect that is bound to happen between investors and board members and mentors and a founder, because actually these are based on trust. And to me, that's the critical part. It's more than the structure is, do we have trust between the founders and the investors and the other people? Because if you have trust, then they'll listen. If you don't have trust, then you won't. I think that's, to me, the key. The last point I would just make on this one is, and again, you're going to run into this problem over time, from time to time, but I still believe it will be not a huge number of founders that hit this wall. And the more successful India is, the more successful startup is, the more everybody will realize that the markets themselves will bring you that discipline. Most importantly, customers ground you. So if customers, if you are not doing well with customers, they will ground you faster than anybody ever will in the world. When we had 500 Fortune, 200 Fortune 500 companies as customers, every day you got knocked on the head by someone. Didn't leave you much time to be not grounded.
Well, that's true. Probably, in the interest of time, I'm going to move to another final bunch of questions from several people, actually. We've got Parag Dhol again, Dilip Ganeriwal, all wanting to know, look, not everyone is as lucky as Yashish was to find a great group of coaches and mentors within his investors. If I have to go out looking for a coach, do I look for someone who's been a founder himself or herself? Do I look for someone with a significant age difference or someone closer to my era and age? Should I look for someone who's had this experience in the same industry? Those are the broad set of questions from this group of people. What kind of coach do I find? Where do I go look for a coach? Two broad questions.
Shall I take it?
Sure, sir. Why don't you go first?
So if you are serious about looking for a mentor, that's firstly a very good step, because it suggests that you recognize the need, which is in itself a major step going forward. My point would be don't go for attribute or specific skill. Firstly, find someone you think you can trust, who you can talk to. That's more. It doesn't matter whether they're old, young, founder, not founder, investors, etc. Of course, it does matter. Sorry, those skills also matter. But find someone you can trust, who you can listen to, who feels they will listen to you and be able to respond to you. Find someone who's a good listener. Find those people, because then they can help you, guide you to other people, and then you can go to somebody else. For instance, if you want to reach out to another founder who's done a startup, well, that you can reach out anyway. And you can ask them, okay, how did you scale? How did you build your organization? What did you do your cash flow? How do you manage your investors? Those are specific questions you can ask a lot of people. But finding someone who you respect and who you trust is very, very important, so that you can go to them for help as appropriate. And I would use that approach more than saying, no, go find another founder. You may or may not trust them, in which case, or respect them, in which case you won't listen to them.
Any thoughts on this one?
I think it's what sir just said. Many times the effort is in making ourselves capable of listening. We are finding people sort of all the time. I remember going to attend a lecture by Deep Kalra on going public and the 7 years post going public, etc. And there were many things that he had said in that lecture that made sense to me now, after having gone public. But honestly, when he was saying them, it was like, what's he on about? Like, you know what I mean, right? I have a huge amount of respect for him, but basically, it did not make sense to me. I wasn't ready.
Yeah.
Wasn't ready to be able to things point by point make huge amount of sense later, right? So I guess it's a tough one. I would say, trust people who've had similar respect, very critical. But I guess the most important thing is forcing yourself to kind of get into that state where you can listen, because otherwise otherwise you'll realize it post facto that it was important if you have good memory.
Pramod, the flip side of this, Agam Gupta, who's a charter member in Thai Delhi NCR, he says, if you're an advisor or a coach, can you deal with founders rejecting your advice whose ego comes into play more than the other ones? Have you faced that situation where a founder listens to you and goes and does exactly what he or she wants to do? And how do you deal with that?
One of those founders.
Okay.
I had a fabulous world class, better than I would say the largest in India, perhaps. We were in New York Stock Exchange. We had fabulous board. I told you the names, but very often I didn't listen to them, and they used to say that to me all the time in the board meeting. And I knew that if I wasn't successful, they would, do something about it. But I certainly didn't listen because, for instance, Srikanth, see, we built an industry out of nothing, doing things that India had never done before. So a lot of people would come to us and say, well, do you have any experience of doing this? I said, I don't have any experience of doing anything that we're doing at Genpact today. And therefore, that's a question that doesn't apply, because we've built other tools and tactics to build this company out, to do high-end analytics, etc. Things like that we started well before anybody else had started thinking about them in 1999, 2000. But the question that we very often had is, it was the courage of conviction, of saying, no, I around reality, and I think this is the right thing to do. I think the question that you want founders to be independent. I value rebellion a lot. I think far more than we are. We're way too accepting, and which is why there's no jalous in India, in Delhi, on pollution, even though we've had bloody pollution killing our children for 10 years, right? Not a single jalous has come out. Why we just take it? ठीक है यार, vaccination, take it. Curfew, ले लो. Mask पहनना, ले लो. I mean, that's rebel, guys. Rebel, stand up. And so I love that attribute. And I think everybody should have it and not be, nay, I'll listen, I'll be thoughtful. No, I think you've got to have that aspect of rebellion in you. It's a very important aspect. I look for it for people. But the question is, if it's a big strategic move, you need to be able to define that, okay, this time the board is serious. If I don't go this way, the board's concerted opinion is that we should. And that kind of change we have to make. Otherwise, normally, in many cases, I think you will get instances where people won't listen to the board, and CEOs often don't. And they don't say no, but they just ignore it. And you keep badgering them for a while, and you realize after a while, they aren't going to do anything about it. So, and I love that aspect of rebellion. So I'm not sure I would categorically say they shouldn't listen. Most people
would not be unhappy if your advice was not taken.
It happens all the time.
All the time, exactly. We're approaching the end of the discussion. I want to end with one final question and topic, which we got from two, Saina Dehnugara and Aditya Bhotika. Both of them have spoken of a similar topic. One, this is about the need, do we need to build corporate governance early on? Because going astray with fast funding and fast scale up has many ramifications. We're seeing newspaper headlines these days. And so one is about corporate governance, and related to that is what kind of a company culture do you want to build so that company as a whole can cope with such growth and rapid scale up, because you don't want your key members also to go, employees to go haywire. So either of you could take the question in terms of how do you build early corporate governance? How do you build culture early enough so that the organization as a whole is able to cope with fast growth and scale funding?
Sir has far more experience in this, but I do agree with the statement that corporate governance should be built as early as possible. Founders have tremendous power compared to what they may have had if they were doing a job instead of building their company. Sometimes they have tremendous power, access to tremendous resources. and thus the balancing governance is necessary. But I would kind of just defer to Sir on this.
No, I think, one of the best things that was done for us by the private equity guy is they brought independent board members on when they didn't need to. Owned 100% by the private equity guys and by GE. And they started bringing, independent board members. On Barter from Allied Signal, Mike Spence came in, Bob Scott came in. These were big boys in their era, right? And they had run multi-billion-dollar. Allied Signal was huge. You can imagine Morgan Stanley is massive. And they were sitting on our board. I think it was fantastic because then you knew that when they said something, you listened. And these were people of stature, and they kept us grounded or made sure that we asked the right questions or asked the right questions to us. And therefore, they were terrific. And therefore, things like compensation practices, etc., framing those. Dennis Nail on our board, he was the former CEO of GE Capital. The CFO of GE was on our board, Keith Sharon. So they were huge people, big guys in the corporate world, anywhere in the world. And they kept us very, very grounded. So one of the things I do look for when I invest is, all right, who else is on that board? Who else are they talking to? Are the board meetings being conducted well? Are they substantive or are they theoretical? And that kind of structure has helped enormously. And the earlier you do it, the better it is. And I commend my private equity guys because they taught me that lesson wonderfully well.
No, that's good to hear. So as we reach the end of the session, I'd like to thank both of you. Both of you brought out very good insights, and I think came from good. Although both of you agreed that there is a problem, the degree and extent might vary. Pramod, thank you for talking about how risk-taking, ability to cope with failure, not putting people on a pedestal, and all the stuff that you experienced at GE, extremely invaluable. Yashish, you spoke from the heart. You spoke about how, as a founder, you faced those moments, how your family brought you down to the ground. I loved the point that you made about it's like gambling when you have too much money and how you equated that to a pivot happening. And I loved what you said, hum badal gaye to hum the hi kya kar. Some of that was fantastic. And I think your point about standing on 5 legs and therefore being grounded because the business is not the only thing you do was again fantastic. But I think one area where the audience will have to think about is that, look, coaching is not something that you can impose on the founders. It's something that has to be nudged. It's something that has to be gently introduced. It has to be with people the founders trust. This cannot be a formal, unlike a large corporate where your CEO says, my next line, I'm assigning coaches to you. It cannot work that way with founders. So I guess the method will have to be completely different. But this has been, I'd like to thank both of you for the time you spent and the gravitas and the insights you brought. Audience, thank you very much. You took the more than 100 questions in advance. You've been great. And finally, I'd like to thank Nitin, Bushra, Meenal, and of course, Geetika from TIE, Delhi-NCR for helping us roll out the first debate March monthly edition